Good morning and welcome to June 2022's Real Estate Live UK programme. Thank you for joining us for this session in partnership with Waltham Forest Council. I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction to Real Estate Live before we get going. The Real Estate Live UK programme takes place 3 times a year and is brought to you by White Label, our partners and sponsors. And for this edition of the programme, we're moving away from the fully virtual events as we head to Liverpool tomorrow for an exclusive in-person investor roadshow. But don't panic, the main plenary sessions from that event will still be available to watch online as well, as always, for free. You can find out more about Real Estate Live UK and this week's programme by visiting realestatelive.co.uk, so do have a look and sign up for any other sessions that may be of interest. But right now, we're heading into our next panel titled Waltham Forest, Creating a New Industrial Approach for Our Investors for Future Opportunities, which, as I mentioned, is in partnership with Waltham Forest Council. Just before we start, I'd like to remind you, the audience, to please feel free to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. And now I'm really pleased to hand over to our chair for this session, Nicola Mathers, who is the CEO of Future of London. Nicola, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bonnie. And lovely to see so many of you joining us this morning. So just to give a bit of context then to the session before we get started, because we've just got an hour together. So obviously every local authority in the land is looking at how to bring prosperity to their area. And that's particularly in terms of the context of COVID and now even the cost of living crisis. So what we're going to be doing this morning is looking at what Waltham Forest are doing in terms of this approach. And we've got a fantastic panel for you. So we're going to be joined by 2, possibly 3 colleagues from the council. So we've got Jonathan Martin, Director of Inward Investment and Higher Education Academic Relationships. And we've also got Patrick Shannon, who's the Masterplan Project Manager. Joining them will be Mark Byles from Newsteer, Bridget Outtrim from Savills, Simon Perks from Prologis, and then we might have also Stuart Murray, who's Strategic Director of Economic Growth within the council. So what we're going to be exploring this morning then is Waltham Forest's approach to bringing, as I say, prosperity into the borough. Now their focus has been actually on looking at industrial, which is I think is really fascinating and something that a lot of other boroughs are looking at. So they want to focus on a set of master plans which are going to be supporting economic regeneration and placemaking in the borough. So and as I said, industrial and logistics have been identified as a key area. So we're going to be hearing about what opportunities are available in the borough. We're going to be hearing about what jobs and skills can be created, about how the council and developers can work together to ensure that the area supports both existing businesses and attracts the right businesses which can attract and retain employees for the borough. So we're going to kick off first of all with a presentation by Jonathan Martin, who's going to give us a look at the council's ambitions for the industrial sector and what are the principles that they are addressing to support this work. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and good morning, everyone. If I could ask for the slides to be brought up, it's just going to be a very quick canter through. May I have the next slide, please? It's just really to set the context of what we're looking to do as a borough, particularly around that inclusive growth to ensure that we do deliver on the promises made to our residents and our businesses. You can see from this slide, we've all had to pretty much go through a pandemic and reset our offer to our businesses and our residents. And for us, that means high quality inclusive growth. But what we've really started to target on is how we can deliver a jobs pipeline for our residents and for our businesses alongside homes and obviously inclusive growth. I've highlighted here for our local plan, which is going through a process at the moment, the 52,000 square metres of industrial floor space that we want to see brought forward in terms of net additional floor space to deliver that for the borough to 2036. And that really ties in with our public services strategy, just to give you the sort of policy context, which is around connecting people with jobs, safe and healthy lives, confidence in our future, and also our 15-minute neighbourhood, all of which link into this session today, particularly around how we're working on that industrial sector. I'm really pleased to be able to be working with colleagues on what this means around embracing that industrial sector that has seen some decline in recent years. And we're master planning that in terms of how we can readdress what is an absolutely fundamental element of our offer to our businesses and our residents, but also the sub-region. So without much further ado, may I have the next slide, please? this sort of gives you an overview of our planning position. So may I have the next slide, please?
Thank you very much. So here you
can see the sort of pan-borough approach to how we're looking at our master planning and our frameworks in terms of developing the borough in terms of overall growth, but also pinpointing where we have those specific areas in relation to the industrial sector. We have Black Horse Lane, Strategic Industrial Land Development Framework, which Patrick will talk to us about in a moment, Low Hall Depot, Lee Bridge Area Framework, again, which is an important area for our industrial sector, as well as a number of others around the plan that you can see on the screen. I won't dwell on this too much other than to pass on to Nicola to go back towards Patrick so he can then talk you through some of the detail of what we've been doing. Over to you, Nicola. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jonathan. So over to Patrick, who's been leading the master plan work. Can you just give us an overview, Patrick, of what you've been looking at? Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Patrick, and I am an architect working as a master plan project manager. And I would see the master planning process as critical to unlocking the potential of industrial locations across the borough to help deliver new types of city that kind of feel and look different than what we've seen before, and help us deliver on our commitment to the 15-minute neighbourhood and good growth by design agenda. So first of all, on a kind of more borough-wide approach, we are very clear in what we want to see in what locations. So we want to see the right sectors in the right locations and the right types of buildings. And we've been working really hard over the last number of years to really understand our industrial assets to make sure we can be as clear as possible in what we want to see where. So some locations or industrial locations close to transport nodes are better suited to co-located schemes. However, beside our strategic road networks, we want to see more industrial and logistics kind of coming forward there. Collaboration is really important to how we kind of deliver this. And we're really proud of our work down at the Black Horse Lane Master Plan, where we have been working with Neat and their development and BlackRock on a kind of framework. They are bringing their hybrid application in line with our industrial framework in the next 2 weeks. The Waltham Forest framework will be online next week, and then we'll see a copy of their hybrid application. The master planning process really needs kind of collaboration, and we're really open for working with different landowners to make sure that we can unlock the true potential of master planning right across the borough. That's it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Patrick. Now I'm going to come to Mark, and the question for you is, how can the industrial sector support regeneration and growth in Waltham Forest, and where have you seen its impact before?
That's great. Thank you, Nicola. So, hi everyone. My name's Mark Byles, and I work for a company called Newsteer, where we are working with forward-thinking authorities, including Waltham Forest, on adapting their approach to industrial from both a policy perspective and also from a market engagement perspective, and also from a delivery perspective. So I'm just going to talk briefly, hopefully in response to this question, about that. So from a bit of an overview, the industrial sector has largely supported regeneration and growth by being deleted over the last 20 years. And I firmly believe that it has a greater role to play in the next 20. 24% of London's industrial floor space has been released in the last 20 years. Prior to 2015, it used to be the prevailing theory that you could only achieve incremental change in employment-led areas through piecemeal enhancement of individual properties. With comparatively low capital values and low base build costs, this was largely true. But since then, we have seen sustained rental growth and acute yield pressure through the lack of supply of new industrial space to keep up with the space being lost. And it is now no secret that industrial land values in London have outstripped all other uses, which has implications for housing delivery. And I want to give a quick shout out to Centre for London, Bridget, who's going to speak shortly, and her colleagues at Savills and the British Property Foundation, who have all released some very stimulating research in these areas in the last few months. But while supply has been historically down, Brexit and the pandemic has accelerated changes to the industrial sector by increasing our reliance and demand for onshore industrial and logistics outputs, such as energy, last mile delivery and media production, which has in turn introduced new occupiers. Many of those occupiers have significant capital to invest in new premises, significant spending power to acquire sites, but also a sophisticated supply chain that stretches beyond the borders of one local authority area. They also have requirements for highly technical jobs and to offer their employees an attractive working experience alongside strong ESG goals. My question is an out-of-town, car-dominated business park with no trees or a cafe or a pub in sight going to cut it anymore? And I know Prologis have a very different approach to that, and I look forward to hearing from Simon later on. I'm not disputing the need for car parking spaces, incidentally, but nevertheless, we do need to think about our sustainable modes of transport. The industrial sector's contribution to regeneration does not just need to mean delivering mixed-use communities where residential is awkwardly co-located alongside 24/7 logistics space, or alternatively, only located on top of the cleanest possible use class E space to satisfy a policy test. Yes, there remains an insatiable demand for housing, and we could do a whole seminar on the challenges and opportunities of co-location, but to continue to service our growing housing development pipeline for sites that aren't on industrial sites, we need an increase in industrial space to be delivered just to sustain and service those homes. We're also going to struggle to meaningfully address the climate emergency if our inner and outer London boroughs are reliant on distribution centres in the Midlands and the North. So how can Waltham Forest support regeneration and growth through the industrial sector? Well, here are my 4 key takeaways for you. There's an opportunity right now to deliver regeneration of our employment areas through coordinated master planning, which you're looking at. But this needs to prioritise the needs of industrial businesses and encourage investment in industrial premises. Don't let residential architects design industrial space. You will count how many columns are present in your supposedly prime new industrial space. Not every master plan has to include residential. My second one is that ensuring master plans are deliverable is challenging for industrial estates that are often in fragmented land ownership. Local authorities are well placed to deliver economic regeneration through coordinated delivery under a common public vision using their land assembly tools, including effecting through compulsory purchase as a last resort. My third point is the occupiers, investors and developers that I speak to always tell me that their 3 priorities are location, workforce and power. Those 3 priorities have shifted in order over the last few years, but the prevailing view is that workforce and power are the current top 2 priorities. Here at Newsteer, we've been working on delivering schemes in industrial estates, even sometimes on the same street, which necessitate that every new scheme that's increasing the amount of industrial floor space has to deliver its own individual substation, which is a significant development cost that could be better spent for the public benefit if that infrastructure was better coordinated. So what can the public sector do to help better coordinate and influence the utilities companies? And finally, how many local plans are reliably predicting an increase in employment floor space? Using historic take-up in a supply-constrained environment to forecast future demand requirements is inherently flawed. And this is one of the key takeaways from some of Bridget's research, which I really support. We need better metrics, including real-time data, to get better evidence to support our policy decisions and create new policies that encourage and enable industrial businesses to thrive. So how about an economic land delivery test?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark, and a very nice segue into Bridget. So Bridget, can you tell us about how the industrial market has been performing across Waltham Forest and East London, and what opportunities do you think that this presents?
Morning, everyone. I'm Bridget Outtrim. I'm a director in the industrial team at Savills, and my bread and butter work every week is letting and selling industrial buildings, usually on behalf of landlords. So we like to be instructed on buildings that we can let with ease. You know, we want the sort of buildings that the occupiers would like to use, and so it's for that reason, that experience, that touch point with occupiers, that we're often asked by developers like Prologis, like Segro, like GLP to help them sometimes with their development briefs and briefing their architects on layout and design. So they may have a site of 5 acres, for example, and intend to put one large building on there, but actually the market says we know it's best to put 10 smaller ones. So that's the sort of work that I do, and on that basis we're speaking to occupiers all the time, and I'm watching with interest, the conundrum in London, the challenge in London, which is, how do you provide more industrial floor space when we need so much housing? And it seems to be that it's been that rub up one against the other. It's industrial versus residential, but actually I think that that's no longer the case. And the reason for that is the way that the industrial market has performed. Waltham Forest in particular, there's been huge increases in industrial land values. We've sold land to industrial developers for pure industrial development for £10 million an acre. Now that means that there's a lot of land in Waltham Forest which is very valuable, which, Patrick might be master planning residential uses on industrial land, but actually if those residential developers can't afford to buy it, or actually it's not in the interest of the owners to sell to a lower value use, then I would argue that the master planning on just industrial land for residential is going to stifle that residential delivery, and that you need some new answers. I also look with interest on the huge, I think it's a bandwagon towards co-location as being the answer to everything. And it's not, because whenever I've seen co-location schemes where I've been invited to comment on the industrial part of it, I've actually been told by an architect to my face that actually, Bridget, well, we're used to designing space that nobody really wants, so we're not going to let, when I complain that it's not actually industrial space that they're providing. And what I've witnessed is the demise of the use class B8, which is storage and distribution, and use class B2, which is general industrial. And by the way, general industrial in London is overwhelmingly food production. So I see the loss of those two uses in favour of makerspace. And I'd never actually heard the term makerspace in 25 years as an industrial agent until I met my residential colleagues. So this is sort of a contrived sort of use that sort of is a fluffy term given to workshops and studios. And actually, those occupiers in London who provide essential services to London residents and businesses, they need more than studios and workshops. They need proper industrial space. And therein lies the design challenge. How do you provide that space to those occupiers who we really need? And provide that, to a high quality, which is going to be useful to them. And I'm glad that Simon Perks is on here, because some of the designs that Prologis comes up with from their intensification is very good, because what a lot of policymakers overlook is the essential need for yards. They see a yard and think there's a bit of space that's not being used, and wrongly want to stick a 5-storey industrial building on it, which looks just like an office building. And it is an office building, it's not an industrial building. And it's time, I think, that planning authorities sort of realise that the emperor is not wearing any clothes, because they're being told that residential developers are providing industrial space, and it's not real industrial space. And what we need to do is to make sure that we are providing proper, fit-for-purpose industrial space in Waltham Forest. And Jonathan, I've just done a quick calculation. You said earlier that the 52,000 square metres of industrial delivery and 27,000 new homes. 52,000 square metres of industrial space is not enough to service 27,000 new homes. It's half of what you really need. So, it's that type of research and understanding that we need in order to get the delivery right. And I'll finish on one note, and that is to please provide industrial space in single-use industrial sites. That can be intensified, but let's keep the residential out of the industrial sites.
Thank you very much, Bridget. And you mentioned about Prologis and the work that you've been doing. So, Simon, over to you. Could you tell us a bit about how you're going to be developing schemes in Waltham Forest, and what your key advice would be for people wanting to come to the borough?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Simon Perks. I'm a development director at Prologis. If people aren't aware of us, we are a business that has over £6 billion worth of assets under management in the UK, and approximately 50% of those are located in London and the South East. In terms of our involvement in Waltham Forest to date, we acquired the Courtry Retail Park back in 2020 from M&G, one of the pension funds. I don't know if everybody knows where Corktree Retail Park is, but just it's located in Edmonton, directly onto the North Circular. And I think just coming back to previous people's comments about the shortage of industrial land supply. I mean, the way that we've been looking at things in London in recent years is trying to look at site opportunities creatively, and industrial sites don't come around very often, and they are very often very keenly priced and chased by developers. So for us, looking at retail parks as an alternative land use, they obviously work well in that they've already got high levels of vehicle movements, which from a planning perspective kind of supports our case. So the site currently is 6 acres and comprises of 7 retail warehouses, totaling just over 80,000 square feet. And effectively, the units have been lined up so we can achieve vacant possession in 2027 to implement our plans. We originally bought the site with the intention of refurbishing for last touch, but we're also now considering the option of potentially going multi-storey on the site. Really think that the site is an excellent location for last touch. Connects really well with the local road network. Also, great proximity to the Meridian Water Regeneration project, which is obviously planning over 10,000 homes. And we're really pleased that the site's now been allocated with a draft allocation for employment use in the emerging local plan. So that's where we are in terms of investment in Waltham Forest at the current point. We're really keen to invest further into the borough and work with the team at Waltham Forest. I think there's really great opportunity and growth prospects. It's clearly got some really great fundamentals in terms of accessibility into London, and as Bridget's mentioned, as a sub-market, it's shown really strong growth over recent years. And I think fundamentally, that the team at Waltham Forest, Jonathan and others, you get a really good vibe that they understand what development's about. You have to look at the range of projects regeneration projects that are currently going on in the borough at the moment. It's really fantastic, and clearly they are open to discussions with developers like ourselves about how we can affect positive change together. So we're really excited about being in the borough, and we want to try and do more there.
Great, thank you very much, Simon. And I'm going to give the last word back to Jonathan for this particular session. And when Jonathan's finished, then we're opening it up to Q&A. So if anyone in the audience would like to ask our fantastic panel a question, please do pop your questions in the Q&A. But back to you, Jonathan. If you could just do a quick summary then of what the up and coming and future opportunities for Waltham Forest inward investment offer, and what are you offering to which investors?
Thank you very much. Yes, no, certainly what I want to make clear to our guests and attendees and delegates is that we're an open borough. As Simon's just highlighted, we are open to investment. We certainly want to work with investors from the industrial sector to bring forward a suitable pipeline that gives the opportunity to grow our industrial floor space. Very conscious of Bridget's very helpful comments around our local plan. And we are seeing this focus through our own work as well as what the market is doing. We're seeing lots of industrialists coming into the borough looking for sites, and we're working where we can with them. I would suggest that the opportunity that lies ahead is that they engage with us as soon as possible. We're more than happy to have early conversations with the industrial sector, as indeed all our investors, because it helps shape the potential of their offer and what they can bring forward in terms of the overall opportunities. I think certainly in terms of sites that we've got coming forwards, previously I've mentioned things such as Low Hall Depot, which is in the south of the borough. We've been looking at areas, as I mentioned on the previous planning slide, Pan Borough, and we're happy to discuss any of those sites that sit within that industrial sector, working with my colleagues such as Patrick and his team, who are doing a sterling job in making sure we are fit for purpose, and we look to really create that additional floor space. We want to make sure we also provide that future proofing for our residents and our businesses, because again, that's something we've seen as a real kind of negative impact from the pandemic. So it's how we can really make sure we are fit for purpose going forward. So again, I'd welcome any of our viewers to make contact with the team. I'm happy to host investor tours and take you around our industrial sectors and the areas of growth, so you can see it firsthand in terms of what's here, as well as working with my colleagues in terms of early engagement, so that you can start to steer any early ideas coming forward. And I think that again can be the best kind of response we can give in terms of Bridget's comments, but also in terms of the concern around what needs to be delivered. There is that focus around changing the planning policy and making sure it's fit for purpose, but also making sure we've got a really good engagement with the market and the sectors therein, because we want to target the industrial sector. We want to make sure we've got that pipeline coming forward for the future. Hopefully that's clear for everyone. Back to you, Nicola.
I think that's very clear that you are definitely open for business. Waltham Forest is open for business. So thank you very much for that, Jonathan. Okay, so we're getting some questions in. Please do post your questions in the Q&A to our panel if it's appropriate to who your question is for. I'm going to just kick us off with one first initial question. Obviously, loads of issues picked up in the presentations just. But one of obviously really important to the council is about jobs and prosperity for the borough, and about being able to use industrial land to address your economic recovery in the borough that everyone is dealing with. So how can the council and the sector work together to make sure that the skills and jobs that are created through this new industrial land are going to be going for local people? And I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to pick that up first. And I know that Mark and Bridget both have kind of views on this as well.
So I'm happy to start off
on that, Nicola. Thanks for directing it towards me. I am aware that we have a very dedicated business growth team and employment skills team that are working on what we can really look to deliver as a borough in terms of that jobs pipeline. We have jobs academies that are coming forward. We have a HGV Academy, for example, dealing with the current pressures around the HGV sector. These are areas where we're responding as quickly as we can in an agile way as a local authority. And again, it shows that we're engaging through listening to what our residents need in terms of the jobs that they need here and now, but also in terms of the sector, particularly around the HGV Academy, for example. And again, in terms of our jobs academies and the pipeline, there's a lot of work that's going into this across our planning team, our business growth team, as well as going into other areas of the sort of engagement we have with our communities. So there is a big piece of work that's been ongoing, particularly around how we can make sure we deliver on the promises through various jobs fairs that have come forward, but working with specific investors and employers around what their needs are. We had a business recovery board, which was again in place to deal with the pandemic, and that was dealing across the piece with the businesses in the borough. And before that, we had a top 20 forum, again, looking at how we could deal with the largest businesses in the borough, either by size or by significance. So again, you can see we're having that dialogue on a regular ongoing basis to make sure we're fit for purpose in terms of what we bring forward. And we really welcome, some of these key investors we do have, including obviously Simon with Prologis. We have BlackRock in the borough working well. We've got Newsteer doing great schemes in terms of in the pipeline for us as well. So these are things that show that we're reflecting and responding to the current needs, but looking at how we can future-proof them, Nicola. Hopefully that's answered a few of the questions.
Okay, brilliant. Mark and Bridget, did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what jobs are we talking about? I think there's a perception issue, potentially, and a bit of a myth-busting issue, I think, potentially for jobs in the industrial and logistics sector. I think there can be a perception that these jobs are low paid, low skilled, low density, but the types of occupiers, historic occupiers, but also the new occupiers that have emerged over the last sort of 10, 15 years or so, have increasingly sophisticated enterprises that don't just have loading jobs, they have automation related jobs, which have R&D elements, they have engineering elements, they have HR elements, they have IT, the whole kind of suite of office uses alongside quite sophisticated technical engineering based jobs that need these type of spaces that don't necessarily, as I said sort of before, will want to be based in a low quality shed somewhere. They want this modern space which delivers an enhanced employee experience. And I think increasing awareness about the types of jobs and the skilled nature of those jobs would help any borough, and I know Waltham Forest are doing good work in this, in increasing that economic recovery.
Great, thank you, Mark. Bridget, did you want to come in on?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I agree with what Mark said about the perception problem. And, you know, we joke in Savills that the industrial team has let more office space than our office colleagues have, because, you know, every industrial building has an office element, and therefore the jobs that you'd expect to find there. But I'd probably make a different point, and that is about making space available for businesses to come. So in London, most occupiers who speak to us need space within the next 6 months. And therefore, that means people like Prologis need to be developing space speculatively, which means taking a huge risk. They're only going to take a risk on building that space if they're confident they can let it. So it's sort of this circle that goes around. You know, the occupiers will come when the space is built. Therefore, you have to allow the developers to build the right sort of space. And I'd give an example. Next door, you know, in Enfield. Enfield has got a huge new film industry, it's been there, it's only arrived, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years or thereabouts. And when we were speaking to the film industry about where they would like to be, overwhelmingly, they all wanted to be in West London or west of London. Okay, the reason they're in Enfield is because there were some buildings available. They're ready for them to occupy, and that was all that they could find in London. So then, you know, welcome the film industry to Enfield. And why are they there? Because of the availability of appropriate space. So my point is, build the right sort of space and you will have prosperity in the borough. And it means spec building and building B8 space, because 65% of the inquiries we get from occupiers for space need B8 space, storage and distribution. And that doesn't mean that they're all delivering parcels. So if you're a lift engineer or an air conditioning engineer and your engineering function is on site, you're serving hotels, occupiers, offices in central London, what you need is not B2 space. You need B8 space. You need a depot. You need somewhere to store your equipment and your materials. So the B8 sector serves a wide range of industrial occupiers. So it's not all about parcel delivery. It's essential services for London. So let's build that sort of space.
Great. Thank you, Bridget. Could I bring you, maybe Simon, in on that in terms of Bridget's point about speculative development, and how do you know what you're going to be building for whom? And you're thinking for the next 6 months, which is obviously a challenge, and then thinking a bit further afield.
Yeah, sure. I think I think it obviously depends on the submarket that you're developing into, and looking at effectively what the take up has been over a period of time. And really, it comes down to what you believe that submarket, in terms of space, what that submarket can absorb. Who are the occupiers out there, looking at, obviously working with the likes of Bridget in terms of tracking inquiries and what's coming to, what customers are going to be coming to market in terms of lease expiries, etc., to really give you that confidence around, building speculatively. I mean, if you look at how Prologis has gone about development, over the last however many years, the vast majority of our space has been built speculatively. So, yeah, it's really, I think, ultimately it's about having confidence in the market that you're developing into.
Great. And so much of that comes down to the data, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to go, we've got a question in the Q&A, so I'm going to go into that. So this is from Keith Grimley. So Hallett, Jonathan, Patrick, do you have green belt constraints, or are you open-minded about proposals which might impact this? Good question.
Yes, we do have green belt constraints, and that's something that we're not looking to open up again. We also have kind of like MOL land kind of constraints as well. But up around where they are, there's around our North Circular Road, that is our kind of our key strategic growth area for logistics and distribution. That's something where we more than likely wouldn't want to see kind of co-located schemes, and are very kind of open to that 100% industrial with distribution and logistics at its heart, beside the key strategic road network.
Okay, brilliant. Jonathan, did you want to add to that, or I'm quite interested in going back to Bridget, go for it.
Yeah, I would comment that I disagree with Patrick on that point. So I think that you should be reviewing your green belts. There's pockets of green belt space. There's sort of places that I come across which are used for refugee camps, not necessarily in Waltham Forest, but we've got fly tipping problems. We've got antisocial behaviour going on land that is designated as green belt. I can think of a site in Waltham Forest which is designated as metropolitan open space, which is currently used as a B8 storage facility, and they're not considering redeveloping that, even though it's clearly used for an industrial purpose. But because it's got the label wrongly labelled as metropolitan open land, because that's not how it's been used for the last 30, 40 years, and yet there's this sort of worship of the green belt that nobody will dare contradict, except perhaps me now saying this. I do think that we should review the green belt. I think it's strangling us. I think that when it was first an idea in the 1940s, I can't remember what the population of London was then, but it's certainly a lot larger. And I just don't think that we should be prioritising our sort of well-being for walks in the country over young people being able to afford housing or employment in London. The population's growing, and we should, I think, look at that in terms of being a real solution to a problem to help people's lives, because there's no better well-being than being able to afford the life that you want to live. There's no point not being able to afford your bills or afford to live anywhere when actually, hey, you can go for a walk in the park. I think that we need to address our worship of the green belts.
Thank you, Bridget. Mark, you've got a...
Yeah, I would just add into that. If you look at the local authorities that struggle with housing delivery or struggle with local plans across London, you see they're all greenbelt authorities. The idea that the protection of urban sprawl, which is kind of the historic backbone to the greenbelt, is more sacrosanct than forcing everybody to go up. I'm not entirely sure that those are the only two options. I think that it's such a political point that it's not really a technical exercise, and I think anymore it's really just a political conversation. And I think all that can be done, and I would agree with Bridget, I think Waltham Forest, I think Kent and other authorities that are facing this should conduct strategic greenbelt use and look at the quality of those, because not all of it is beautiful fields of grain and the type of landscape we sing about in Jerusalem. Some of it is these really poor quality, poorly located spaces which are just there to satisfy policy tests. So the more technical evidence you can put out there to help assist that conversation and move it away from being a purely political one, I think the better.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of kind of Bridget's concerns, and we are kind of going through a process of enforcement around the North Circular Road to make sure that we remove all those illegal developments. But it's kind of also important to bear in mind when we think about metropolitan open land and green open spaces, about other planning pressures we're under in relation to Epping Forest and our SANG strategy. So the forest is dying, and we need to kind of enhance and improve our kind of existing green spaces and be kind of more strategic in how they are developed and kind of coordinated together. So there's kind of a balancing going on between many different parts of the planning process and what we need to deliver on for our residents.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, did you want to come in on that? Or?
Yes, please. I'd just like to add that.
Again, these are really valid points worth discussing, and we have been working as a local authority to be sympathetic to our environment, and what we have worked on is the assets we already have in the borough. So, for example, Walthamstow Wetlands is the largest type of natural capital in Europe for a working reservoir at 211 hectares. You know, the nearest comparable is Barnes wetlands at 44 hectares. So again, it's 5 times the size. It's free to access for all of our residents, occupiers and users. And that's something we've given back to our sort of growing communities and also developable areas. So again, it's something we're working with within the constraints of our own environment. We know that we sit as potentially one of the greenest boroughs to the north of the Thames. And that's something that, you know, we do use as a real sort of lung of health and well-being that we can service with these new up-and-coming areas, such as Black Horse Lane, for example, such as Lee Bridge. So there are things we are working within to make sure that we can deliver on making sure we bring back into use the natural capital, the green space, the waterways to support industrial development. Because, for example, Blackrock sits next door to Waltham wetlands. And they've seen a lot of investment going into that area, and all of their users and occupiers will be able to access those wetlands in terms of easy access to health and well-being. So it's something we're putting a lot of thought into, a lot of work with the team to make sure that we can literally maximise the opportunities that we have that are already available, just as a response to the comments that have been made. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Jonathan. As well, I guess my next question is, obviously Bridget's made a very good case for the fact that we just don't have enough industrial land across the country, I guess, and that's not just London. But it's challenging to bring in industrial land into any borough, you know, which is quite high density, a lot of people living here. We're not talking about, you know, those spaces next to the motorway, but bringing that industrial space into London is fundamental in terms of helping London continue to function. So maybe one of the questions is about how do we make industrial land fit in a London borough, and whether that's about where it's located, its links with transport and the design of the space. Just your responses, I think, and that's open to anyone on the panel really. It's how do we make industrial land attractive to not just the communities that are around it, but also obviously the councils in terms of its ability to bring in new jobs. Bridget, go for it.
I think that the industrial markets can come to your rescue here, actually, Nicola. I think the fact that our land value is now so high, it means that industrial developers have got the spending power to go out and buy hotel sites. They can buy retail sites, we've heard from Simon. They can buy office parks. They can buy all of those other commercial sectors out and put industrial space there, provided that the planners will let them do it. So if it's a really well located retail park for industrial, then why not allocate that as still land so that the next buyer, and it probably will be an industrial developer that buys it, will be able to develop it. You know, this is planning, sort of steering the markets so that it will work. Because there's absolutely no point master planning if actually the market's never going to follow the course that's been set. So it's working together to make sure that the industrial space can be put into the right place. So I'd say that the high industrial land values, yes, on the negative side, it could potentially stifle residential delivery, but actually it's liberating. It means that industrial space can be put in other parts of the borough. Car showrooms, you know, nobody likes cars, you know, at the moment. They're down on those. Let's put industrial space on them. No, I think that's where the real opportunity is. That, and I do really believe that we should be reviewing the green belt as they are doing in Enfield and in Hounslow. You know, they are looking at, those two boroughs are looking very carefully at releasing land in the green belts, you know, for the benefit of everyone that lives there.
Thanks, Bridget. Simon.
Yeah, I just say that in terms of how we incorporate industrial into, you know, highly congested areas, I mean, one of the things that we're working on really hard is how we design quality buildings, because I think, you know, undoubtedly there's a negative perception of how, you know, traditional industrial units look. You know, probably if you ask the majority of people, they'd say it's, you know, probably a crinkly tin unit. So we're working really hard in terms of how the aesthetics work and how we can create a building that, people would drive by and actually say, wow, what's that? We want to create a point of interest and something that really fits in with the surrounding environment. I think that, we think that's really critical to ensuring that these industrial uses do fit into the local context.
And I guess also the opportunity to create quality of environments for the people that work there as well is equally as important.
No, absolutely. I think, one of the number one headaches for customers is in terms of how they retain staff and how they attract talent. And I think if you don't create an environment, for them to enjoy and thrive working in, then, you're going to struggle to retain those staff levels. So we're looking at all kinds of things around how we develop, the space between our buildings. We're providing gym facilities. If you look at some of the things our European colleagues are doing, you've probably got a little bit better weather than we do. But in terms of basketball courts, actually putting public art on the outside of buildings, so you've got such a good blank canvas. Creating dedicated walkways, cycleways, really trying to ensure that, that people's, health and well-being is absolutely top of the agenda.
Great, thank you. Mark, and then I'm going to come to Simon.
Oh, I was the guy. I was the one who was on mute. So just briefly, I mean, London's evolved with industrial spaces next to residential spaces over time, and it's a city where you used to be able to live and work in a very short area. And I do think there is something that can be done about the myth busting, improving the attractiveness of a career in these spaces, and the training and the employment opportunities they can afford, so that it doesn't feel like, oh, I live next to this big shed that the lorries wake me up at 5 a.m. It's no, that's my business. That's, this is where my kids work. This is where we aspire to work to. They've got space available for my business that I've been running out of my room in a pandemic that it could move into the future. And these spaces get reclaimed. And there is obviously massive investor appetite from overseas and other sectors, but improving the kind of local narrative about what these spaces can be for people in their local areas, I think would also help.
Great, thank you, Mark. And Patrick.
Yeah, just kind of following on from what Mark's saying, as we all know, our kind of view and perception of industrial design is moving on, and the narrative is changing. And what we want to see at Waltham Forest, and what we're trying to do, is by putting master plans in place, is moving beyond buildings and moving into places. So that's changing the perception of what's going on there and making a new type of city, or a new part of the city that we haven't seen before, that hasn't been delivered yet, but is greener, is kind of connected to the surrounding area, that people are proud of, that walk through on their way to other parts of their kind of neighborhood. And I think we're just kind of at the start of that journey. It's these as places, which is really important to kind of pick up on.
Thank you. Bridget.
Yeah, Patrick knows I'm going to pick him up on that point he made about people walking through industrial areas. We mentioned this. I know he wants to placemaking, and I agree completely that we need to sort of improve the environment of industrial parks. But I do think that, that not at the sacrifice of getting the fundamentals right. The industrial occupiers need certain basic facilities. That includes the ability to, for example, bring an HGV up to a loading door and load and unload efficiently without, joggers going past or people with push chairs. So let's give the industrial occupiers their own space in order so that for them to be able to function efficiently and safely, apart from anything else. So that all of those considerations need to come first. And then the aesthetics obviously need to follow that.
And master planning is really important for designing out those kind of conflict between different user groups, but it doesn't mean that we can't have them and that we can master plan intelligently to kind of avoid those kind of conflicts.
Yeah, because I suppose, and also I imagine, Patrick, doing the master planning addresses Bridget's point about how to what degree is planning is really truly encouraging industrial use in any borough, and master planning is part of addressing that, isn't it? To be able to demonstrate how industrial land can be well sited in the borough, is well connected, and addresses the points that Bridget's talking about you have to be thinking about the functionality of that site first, but that can be designed in but you can only do that if you're looking at something on a master plan scale. And then we also talked about the sort of the efficiencies of doing master planning and the ability to be able to plan for power and all of that. I don't know whether you want to come in on that.
Quite often with the master planning process in industrial locations, it's really hard when site ownership is so small, and we really need landowners to come together so they're not individually delivering open space, or they're not individually delivering kind of like power or heat networks, that we're kind of thinking of it holistically. And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing with this kind of industrial approach, is how do we get people to work together? At Black Horse, Lanesill, we're kind of quite fortunate with Neat and Blackrock that they own a substantial amount of the land inside the sill, so they have space to move things around to be kind of more appropriate. But where land ownership is kind of smaller, more fragmented, it's more difficult to kind of encourage that kind of holistic kind of like approach, and getting landowners kind of to work together to make sure that we're not overly providing 2 access routes or 2 cycle routes, or that we have kind of a strategic approach to make sure that's as successful and efficient as possible, because we need to get more efficiency out of these lands. We need to intensify. We need things to stack where it's appropriate and it's viable. And the master planning process and having skills in-house in a local authority like Waltham Forest, where we're working through the GLA policy on loads of different projects in loads of different ways, is like really, really important.
Thanks. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I do think master plan is really important, and I think it's just making sure that the drivers behind the master planning is right, and that, as I touched upon that sort of fragmented ownership point, and we're very used to in the built environment industry master planning mixed use schemes, and there you could say it's not an industrial estate, it's a high street, and there you've got fragmented land ownership, you've got everyone owning 20 retail units in the area, but somehow we're able to master plan those schemes and get those deliverable. But really, the approach that we're taking to master planning industrial needs to be informed by those industrial spaces first. It really has to consider that, because it's your ground floor amongst anything else, and you've got to be not running down your pedestrians and your mums walking their kids around. You've got to make sure that that industrial space is lettable and delivers you the value that you expect, so that your scheme is viable and then is delivered. And those processes can be led by the slightly outdated thinking that, well, it has to have enabling residential in it in order to be viable. And the point is that the market has moved on that, and it's not the case anymore. So we do have an opportunity to properly master plan employment-led areas without residential, and you could create holistic thinking about ensuring the spaces between buildings, the access routes, the power, that all that works for those industrial occupiers without having to do compromises on residential space.
Great, thank you. We've got to wrap up now. I'm going to invite each of you, and I'm going to give Jonathan the last word because we are talking about Waltham Forest. If you would make one recommendation to make genuine industrial space work in Waltham Forest or any other borough, what would be your ask, I guess? And I'm going to come to Bridget first, and then to Simon, then to Mark, then to Patrick, and then finish off with Jonathan. So Bridget.
I would say keep industrial space out of mixed use schemes. So separate it from residential. And I say that because the sort of industrial space that goes into residential schemes is not fit for purpose. And you're expecting residential developers who tend to lead on these residential schemes to build industrial space which they don't want, they don't like, and they don't understand. So keep industrial out of residential schemes and give it its own space. And that is the difficult ask, but it's what all industrial occupiers actually deserve.
Thank you, Simon.
I'd really focus on, if we're looking to enable local economies to continue growing, we need to attract large businesses, and I think logistics is a great way of doing that. And I think one of the things that we're really keen on doing with Waltham Forest is, I understand you've got a high on your agenda is sustainability piece, and I think that's something that we've been doing for a number of years and have got a real focus on. So I think if we're going to change people's perceptions of how the logistics market works, I think sustainability is a great way of kind of trying to tackle that one together.
Brilliant, thank you, Simon. I think I said Mark and then Patrick. I can't remember why. Go for it, Mark.
I would say continue to evolve in being a champion for what real industrial space is, and that work to improve the perception, do your myth busting, enhance your evidence base, so you can demonstrably say this is how we're supporting this business, this is how we want this kind of use to operate within our borough, and this is how we're delivering it.
Great, thank you. Patrick?
I would say engage as soon as possible. Working through the policy is very long and complex. It's taken us 2 years with Neat and BlackRock. So we need to kind of begin those conversations as early as possible. We're in a position where we can really help guide things because we know what we want, and we've kind of worked through the master plan process, and be open to collaboration, working with other landowners to help lock the true potential of kind of larger areas of industrial space.
And last word with you, Jonathan.
Thanks very much, Nicola.
I think for us, it's really around how we can improve the social value of these schemes. Picking up on the point that Simon made around climate emergency, there's a big piece around better communication on how this improves places, the social value around apprenticeships, the vocational opportunities, the better PR around selling the industry, I think would be a good way to engage with us as a local authority and work on that, as Simon's already identified and Bridget's really highlighted for us. How can we make sure we get the message out there and make sure it's clear? That would be my sort of takeaway.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. I think that's been a really fascinating panel discussion, kind of obviously going into some wider issues beyond Waltham Forest in particular, around the role of industrial land in London. So I'd like to thank Jonathan, Simon, Bridget, Mark and Patrick. And now I'm going to hand back over to Bonnie. Over to you.
Thanks, Nicola, and echo your thanks to the panel for a great conversation, discussing one of my favourite parts of the property sector and some good healthy debate, which we always like to see. And I'll echo Keith's comments in the chat that it's fantastic to see London boroughs focusing on industrial and logistics development. So look forward to more of that as part of Real Estate Live going forward. Before we leave today's session, I just want to make the audience aware of the sessions we have taking place today. Right now at 12:30, we have a Building Garden Communities session when we ask, how do you embed culture in a new community? And before we close the day, we then have a session exploring how to generate footfall in 2022. You can find out more about the sessions on the Real Estate Live UK website and sign up for them if you're interested. And then to refresh the memory, we also have our Liverpool panels tomorrow and some more of the programme on Thursday, so lots more to see. If you can't make any of the sessions, or if you want to watch this one back because it was fantastic, then all the sessions will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel. Just search for Real Estate Live UK on there, and make sure you follow us on social media for more updates on future events going forward. So thank you all again once again for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.